God, that hurt. No, no, no! God damn it. The David vs. Goliath complex is a widely loved staple amongst gamers. Defeating a Herculean, seemingly immortal beast as a minuscule underdog birds a certain satisfaction that can't be replicated. Perhaps this is because it fills a bitter void in modern reality where honest mom and pop shops are snuffed out by the likes of Walmart and their descendants are doomed to a life behind the deli counter. It's for the same reason that gamers are anxiously awaiting the AAA release of Affordable College of the Video Gamer. Daddy actually comes home from his grocery trip 17 years ago simulator. But I digress. Enabling immersion through a game surrounding design aspects is more important in the Mortal Man vs. Massive Monsters playstyle than any other. The average player's suspension of disbelief is a tragically finite resource that wears thin quickly, and a huge chunk of it is automatically allocated towards accepting the existence of a creature whose dick alone stands taller than they do. From there, every single unwarranted detail exponentially detracts from immersion until you're consciously sitting in your room again surrounded by spent Hot Pocket sleeves and the thick film of your own musk. Capcom's Monster Hunter series is no stranger to this playstyle, while boasting a learning curve that can be best illustrated by a stray pube. With each incremental installment having not only completely rolled over but built upon existing mechanics, the game's obvious reluctance to cater to casuals likened abrupt entry into the series to jumping blindfolded into a revolving door going at 200 RPMs. Noticing this, Capcom was swift to pull up a chair and indulge in a flurry of bludgeonings before concluding that in order to increase player base and subsequently gross revenue, the doors needed to be slowed down, or at least lined with packing peanuts. Enter Monster Hunter World, an installment aimed at making entry into the series more than just a concussive dream while retaining the same core aspects that returning veterans know and love. The primary premise remains the same, where giant monsters trounce freely around the land, and regardless of whose land it is, it's your job to put the back of their place, that being somewhere on a clothing rack. But it's the complexities between the lines that hail the Monster Hunter lineage as a complex beast that must be slain in a way coincidentally symbolic to the gameplay itself. Being that this is my first stumble into the series, let's see how well this was done. So the story begins. You are a customizable monster slaying enthusiast being shipped to the aptly named New World to support the expedition whose primary goal is to research the migratory habits of elder dragons. While progressing towards the ultimate objective, you are also tasked to research the indigenous life via cutting, severing, smashing, breaking, and fashioning into stunning new underwear. Now, having an extremely general story with non-existent indications of who you were prior to your deployment isn't a bad thing. It allows you to project your own personality through gameplay and share a common driver of actions with your character as opposed to trying to sympathize with theirs. All you need to know is you kill monsters good and dead and you're pretty damn effective at it, so off you go. What's odd is that in the early portions of the game you receive bits and pieces of dialogue volunteered from NPCs that preemptively justify your murderous undertaking, things along the lines of, we need to research and understand the monsters, or we must maintain balance while not being wasteful. But about that, the only thing we understand after we massacre a species is their least preferred place to be smashed by what force of nature, which wouldn't even be necessary if we weren't killing them in the first place. Even the primary goal of studying elder dragons to understand why there's a mass migration to the new world every 10 years doesn't click. There's a mission early in the game where you find the same elder dragon that your ship crashed into at the beginning, not the other way around. He was kind enough not to contact your insurance, and your objective is to capture him through means of rapid fire cannonballs and whaling harpoons. The phrase short-sighted comes to mind. I wasn't sure what the expedition would have done had they been successful capturing it, and I have a suspicion they weren't either. It's difficult enough to get answers with the whole language barrier in mind, much less right after you've effectively researched its face in a tartar. Now, what's this about balance and not being wasteful? It takes 7 pelts to craft this strapping midwinter ensemble, but 14 bat turkeys had to be slaughtered to attain just that. So what happened to the rest of the creature and the 7 other ones? They're obviously not used for food unless you can identify the part on this monster that when cooked down bears any semblance to a Costco roast chicken. The issue here isn't that pixel children in Pixel Africa are starving while we only select the finest furs for our stylish duds, but that the little amounts of storyline that are superfluously volunteered don't coincide with the gameplay. If storytelling isn't the focus, pointed dialogue should be limited as much as possible to avoid inconsistencies. Let the environment and gameplay tell the story, especially considering how well those two aspects were created. Why wouldn't they? So much effort was put into designing monsters that coincided with their respective regions. From cosmetics to movements, each creature embodied their surroundings and emanated the aura that they belonged. This was their home, and you were but the unwelcome neighbor who presented the store-bought cobbler as a mission to bum on their couch. This seamless mesh of entity and arena brought the world to life and enabled true immersion, which, and the following statement sounds so cheesy I'll be compensating in advance, football waffle stomping mushroom stamp across the left cheek allowed the player to become one with their character. This type of emotional relationship established within a game is the ideal catalyst for immersion. Emotional investment naturally leads into the ever-addicting what happens next mindset, which is the perfect driver progression and one that's taken full advantage of within Monster Hunter World. The pacing of the campaign holds you captive in one area just long enough for complacency to begin settling in while piquing your anticipation of the next matching shoes and jacket. I mean monsters that await the studying end of your combat tenderizer in the next area, or whatever your preferred weapon of mass research is. And there are plenty of options, 14 to be precise, ranging from Lord of the Flies to Death by Folksong. Each carries their own unique playstyle, timing windows, and combo mechanics to where the same input creates a beautiful and deadly flourish of blades for one weapon and initiates the bend over and spread cheeks animation for another. This favors specialization or refinement over the jack of all trades, master of nothing approach commonly utilized in hack and slash games where spamming X and Y in sporadic intervals with any weapon results in eliminating half of China's headcount a la Dynasty Warriors. The combination of weapon depth and active dodging turned every fight into an investment that never let you drop your guard until the job was done. But there's a curious lack of cathartic release upon victory that even the game seems to sympathize with. The monster falls over and the camera pans over to your hunter who's nonchalantly dusting off their legs or casually scribbling in their notebook as if Dinosaur Rexton was right below milk and eggs on the grocery list. And it might as well be. There's no monster you encounter that won't eventually be farmed for parts because armor plating is so 2 hours ago and fish testicles all the rage. But it's difficult difficult not to get drawn in by the copious amounts of crafting options. Every time you move into a new region, another 5 or so armor sets and weapon upgrades are made available since there are 5 or so new creatures in line for the endangered list. Every addition to the armory carries its own resistances and cosmetic appearance that make it completely unique, while every new weapon upgrade increases the base or elemental damage of what was previously available. This vast selection of options makes preparation enjoyable. Creating and swapping out full sets depending on the type of monster you'll be hunting actually plays with the theme of research. No, not that kind of research. Gameplay-wise, I give Monster Hunter World a hesitant strongly consider. The game is called Monster Hunter, not Monster Nipple Repurposer, but as you get deeper into the game, crafting ultimately dictates which monsters you hunt. This creates an inverse relationship that shifts focus away from the extremely well-designed and smooth combat and consequently changes what gameplay aspect gratification is associated with. You're no longer crafting better gear to hunt stronger monsters, you're hunting stronger monsters to craft better gear, which misdirects the player's interpretation of the reward. Now, I hate using the term grindy because it seems to carry a naturally negative connotation, although World of Warcraft is one of the most popular titles in the world, and how the hell do you explain that game without that word? But Monster Hunter is grindy. When only 1 of 4 bear scrotum are sufficiently pliable enough to be considered utilizable and 3 are needed just for the inner lining of your left glove, the females are going to have to get creative to keep the species moving. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. The grinding aspect, that is, not the asexual reproduction. What determines the favorability of a grindy game is an individual player's interpretation of how much work is worth the expected payoff, and even then the value of payoffs vary from person to person. But let's be honest, the bar between grind and payoff for this particular game is set rather high, somewhere around 15 to 20 hours high, before the crafting menus and explorable areas provide enough options to allow the game to open up, which makes sense as to why Monster Hunter has a rather niche and loyal following. So if instant gratification is your cup of tea, it's most likely a rather cold and tasteless cup of tea, and Monster Hunter is probably not for you. Regardless, the unique environments of monsters were masterfully crafted so that each new encounter felt unfamiliar and daunting. The seemingly endless variation of creatures makes for hours of entertaining battle and mechanics to learn. Combat is easy to understand, though hard to master, encouraging players to geek good if they ever want to truly experience the depths of Monster Hunter. But the game's habit of turning each new monster into a punch card dulls your exciting initial recollection until it's nothing but a heavy sigh heaves after your 5th Tobikadachi and a rodent bear scale adequately shiny enough to grace your fucking fez. However, if there's one thing climate change deniers have taught us, is that the only thing more fun than jeopardizing the existence of multiple species is doing it with a friend, hence a rather chummy relationship with the Trump administration. So let's take a look at Monster Hunter World's co-op. Sing along if you know the words by now. A great co-op experience must establish a form of dependency upon your teammates. While there are many ways to go about this, Monster Hunter World has chosen the more is better approach, where any conflict can be best resolved by throwing more bodies at its Zerg style. And this isn't a careful selection of bodies, no, any body will do. Despite the 14 unique playstyles presented with each weapon choice, none of them are fundamentally different. The lack of an underlying aggro system or dedicated healer eliminates the need for a structured party. Your superficially tryhard team of 2 rangers, a high DPS melee, and a tanky brawler is just as effective at taking down monsters as my Dropkick Murphy's cover band, albeit a little less hearing impaired. But there is a distinct advantage to partying up. Having 3 more options in the monster buffet line means that only a quarter of the time you get handed the aggro stick, upon which you roll around as if your Rathalos Fleece jockstrap is suddenly combusted while your buddies test out the latest and greatest tech and monster proctology. And you best hope the next target in the cycle can give them the old razzle dazzle as the monster thoroughly research the effects of its foot on their face and you lose one of your team's shared 3 lives. Yes, you heard right. Each mission you embark upon has a total of 3 lives, or feints as they call it, because these hunters are sufficiently swollen enough that having their internal organs grounded into postage stamps carries the same health detriments as forgetting to take their blood pressure medication that morning. These 3 feints are shared among the members of your party, so if you fire your SOS flare and the server responds with Mr. No pre-fight meal for me please, roughhousing on a full tummy gives me gas, you might not want to get too invested in your own success. The game makes you weigh the possible consequences of calling in for help on a mission that you may very well be able to do yourself, seemingly encouraging independence. But this coincides with the co-op gameplay as a whole. Hardly ever do you interact with your chosen co-op partner should you have one, or anyone on the server in that case. The research base is individualized, so even though there are 4 chairs surrounding the canteen, they'll never be filled by anything aside from your own lonely ass cheeks. Even in the story missions, the only time you get to pair up with anybody is when the combat literally starts, in which you're forced to scramble through the menus to find the SOS flare option and perform the entire animation, uninterrupted by the likes of any movements, monsters, or Kanye West. Then after the mission is over, regardless of whichever side was appropriately studied into the dirt, you have to go through the whole process again. This triathlon of hoops makes initiating co-op a naggy recurring inconvenience. It's better defined by temporary help rather than a mutual experience, although maybe this was Monster Hunter's intention. Not every game with multiplayer features needs to abide by the rules of a great co-op experience because it's not always the focus. If a game's primarily meant to be experienced alone but wants to allow for difficult sections to be overcome by the power of friendship or whatever, multiplayer capabilities can be implemented, but the co-op score is used to pass judgment on a game's overall ability to enhance the multiplayer experience. So for this I gave the co-op a dismissive meh, with the stipulation that co-op should not be the primary selling point, averaging the total score from Monster Hunter World to a solid worth a try, in the same fashion that wiring the contents of your bank account to a Nigerian prince who promises exponential return may also be worth a try, but that was often met with remorse as well.